Dominic Cummings isn't the first spin doctor to become the story during a crisis. Like his predecessor, what may cause him more sleepless nights than the scandal itself is his loss of ability to control the perception of the government. In politics, it's an often repeated phrase that when the advisor becomes the story, the advisor has to go. And when the news that Boris Johnson's chief special advisor Dominic Cummings broke the UK's coronavirus lockdown, it was his turn to be in the spotlight.
I am not the story here.
Well, no, you kind of are the story, Mark. Look, they spelt your name right and everything.
That was the thick of it's Malcolm Tucker, based off of New Labour's chief strategist and spin doctor Alistair Campbell, renowned for controlling government communications with the press, making enemies due to what was deemed his ruthless manner of controlling the press, and his manipulative attempts to reframe criticism of the Labour government.
What is the message?
Well, that's for the politicians to tell you.
Come on.
But you exploited stories for a while to actually kind of take the pressure off on various hot points.
He too became the centre of attention and became the story for producing the sexed up dodgy dossier that made questionable claims about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction in order to justify the UK going to war in 2003.
The answer to the question, yes or no, did we abuse British intelligence? The answer to that question is no.
You are now part of the story. When the government's communications chief is himself part of the story, isn't it time he resigned?
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Because I am not the story here.
Not many shed a tear when he was under the spotlight and pressure, with many believing his mastery of the dark art of perception and media management had corrupted politics.
You're the person, above all else, who actually created a political environment where no one believed a word a politician said after a bit.
I'll tell you something.
We're trying to restore
John,
honesty and confidence in politics again that you destroyed.
Despite his talents, there are some events that no amount of spin can change the public's perception of, and the public popularity for the Iraq War was unchangeable. The fallout of the dossier scandal soon resulting in Campbell's resignation from government. Dom too has many enemies due to his aggressive demeanour.
If you're going to do interviews, why don't you actually research what you're talking about before you come out here? Then you wouldn't look like such a joker.
And for calling the Tory Eurosceptics who craved the Brexit he would deliver for them as useful idiots, tumours and thick as mints. Here's Benedict Cumberbatch's portrayal.
Dominic, for the love of God, you need to learn to be a little more...
I won't suffer fools, therefore I won't suffer 90% of politicians. Frankly, I don't see the point in them. And what the fuck?
He's not exactly viewed as a Tory true believer either.
I know a lot of Tory MPs, and I'm sad to say the public is basically correct. Tory MPs largely do not care about these poor people. They don't care about the NHS.
He has more interest in reshaping government institutions into better functioning systems operated by scientists and engineers rather than posh former politics students. So again, there's plenty of people out there happy for this scandal to be the end of him. But he does have powerful defenders, even of the most absurd element of his statement. The claim he went on a 60-mile round trip to a town on his wife's birthday as a means to test his eyesight.
Would you go on a 60-mile round trip to test your eyesight?
That's the right way of putting it.
It's not just his whereabouts that will have Cummings worried. I want to explore the last scheduled question that was asked of him, which for me was the most effective and insightful.
What is your message from Conservative voters who voted this government in less than 6 months ago, a lot of them for the first time in the North East around Durham, who want you out of Downing Street and want you out of this government?
This question is about his message to a demographic that's of critical importance to him. Directing messages to this demographic is what he does best. It's his unique selling point. Getting the perspective of people outside of the Westminster bubble is why he's the asset that he is, and if this ability leaves him, gone are his ambitions of reprogramming politics for the better. Take 2016 and the Brexit referendum, in which he led the Vote Leave campaign to victory. Firstly, the Leave coalition was already broad, with people voting for various reasons and who were going to vote Leave regardless of any campaign and regardless of Dominic Cummings. Up front, you had Nigel Farage and voters of his former party, UKIP, the third most popular party in terms of vote share in 2015, a home for both well-off libertarians, too extreme for the Tories, and more economically left-wing former Labour voters, united by socially conservative beliefs rather than financial status, with major concerns about immigration. The Leave coalition also had the lifelong Eurosceptic Tories thirsty for deregulation and further divergence. You also had Bennites from the left, although not this one in particular.
See, totally unaccountable to anybody,
powers have gone from national parliaments. They haven't gone to the European Parliament, they've gone to the Commission and to some extent to the Council of Ministers. These are quite serious matters.
Cummings' messaging, however, delivered through targeted ads and heavyweight politicians, was able to resonate more effectively with the undecided, or those wanting to leave but afraid of the consequences.
What are we doing? Taking back control! What are we doing? Taking back control!
Leave arguments were even able to reach people who had never previously voted, those who felt powerless to make change, those who became disenfranchised with politics and didn't think politics spoke to them.
For a lot of people, Take Back Control made them think, yeah, these are the guys who screwed up the economy, who drove it off a cliff in 2008, whose mates are all the Goldman Sachs bankers and the hedge funders on massive bonuses. Us mugs on PAYE are the ones paying the bills for this. We'll show those guys. We'll take back control from you lot in London.
Capturing that sentiment that control could be regained simply hits the gut more so than Farage's immigration rhetoric, off-putting to millions, or David Cameron's descriptions of economic Armageddon, as the economy doesn't work for a lot of people anyway. Without winning these uncertain voters over, there would be no Brexit. Despite not running the Tories' election campaign in 2019, but knowing that there was always going to be one before 2022, given Johnson's lack of a majority to get Brexit done, he laid the groundwork for their eventual landslide by ensuring this disparate Leave coalition stayed united. While many on the left believed that Boris having to extend the departure date would be his downfall, others saw this as playing into a narrative trap. Cummings' unlawful proroguing, the encouraging the questionable use of provocative language during the Ben Act fiasco,
the Capitulation Act or the Surrender Act or whatever you want to call it,
contributed to a chaotic Parliament versus the people narrative, where MPs debating the terms in which the UK left the EU became Parliament frustrating the will of the people in order to overturn the result.
I've had death threats overnight. Should be dead.
Unlike sneaky reframing answers of the Campbell era, Cummings opts for a no-answers approach.
I will uphold the Constitution, I will obey the law, but we will come out on October the 31st.
Well, how, if the MPs have changed the law to stop you doing that?
We're going to come out on October the 31st.
But how?
Rather than tapping into the idea that lower income, left behind communities could take back control of their lives, in 2019 he was setting an undeniably seductive narrative of this same group being betrayed by elites that looked down on them, and MPs couldn't help but contribute. Some of course genuinely wanted to avoid a no-deal exit, some of course genuinely felt that they could convince the government to leave but stay in the customs union, but as some MPs were genuinely trying to overturn the referendum result, there was a hint of truth to Cummings' narrative. Messaging of this nature depends on finding a hint of truth and exploiting it, whether that is either through gross simplification of complex issues into their most easily digestible, oven-ready form, or through equally gross exaggeration. But COVID has disrupted Cummings' ability to message this demographic. Since leaving the EU in January, off the back of that major election victory, can this Leave coalition continue to exist when reality rapidly begins to hit those with less harder than those with more? And if it does exist, then what message can mitigate or spin this reality into a positive reflection of the government? Polling is showing support for both Boris and his government is falling. While people rallied behind the stay-at-home message and there was overwhelming support for the government in the early stages, PMQ performances have been disastrous.
But yesterday we learnt, tragically, that at least 29,427 people in the UK have now lost their lives to this dreadful virus. That's now the highest number in Europe. It's the second highest in the world. That's not success, or apparent success. So can the Prime Minister tell us, how on earth did it come to this?
Stay Alert was torn to pieces as the replacement slogan, as was Johnson's broadcast where he unveiled this.
So we are saying, don't go to work, go to work. Don't take public transport, go to work, don't go to work. Stay indoors. If you can work from home, go to work.
No one is saying that this is an easy time for government strategists or communications experts, but now that people have experienced loss of loved ones and livelihoods, simplified messaging, devoid of any admission of mistakes, isn't landing. His narratives demand on an elite frustrating and failing real people, and at this moment, he'd probably be better off working for the opposition.
This is ridiculous.
That final question about what message he has for those that voted Tory for the first time, Cummings may have taken so long to answer this question because, for the time being at least, he doesn't have that winning message for them.
What's my message to them? Well, I think I've made mistakes in how I've dealt with this, all sorts of things in government. I don't think I made a mistake about these 14 days that are in question, and I would I would stress to people that they should not believe everything they read in the newspapers or everything they see on TV.
Devoid of any irony that he once thought he could sway this demographic with a big sign on the side of a bus. As with most populists, the mainstream media is a permanent target for Cummings. See his demands that the government boycott the Today Show, Good Morning Britain.
You've gone into the fridge.
Boris Johnson avoiding Andrew Neil.
So it was surely not expecting too much that he spent half an hour standing up to me.
All of this is probably more interesting than how one family looked after their 4-year-old, and not as been as suggested in the newspapers, driving back and forth and back and forth.
OK, thanks for the job tips. Much appreciated.
Threats to scrap the BBC licensee and threats to re-evaluate Channel 4's licence. At the minute, this anti-media strategy is all Dom has, and while attacking those that attack the government has an appeal to some, as does shouting fake news.
That we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
Can attacking the media work when large sections of society, and by default given the landslide, Conservative voters, disagree with actual government COVID policies, disliking the government for either entering lockdown too slowly, entering lockdown at all, coming out of lockdown too soon, spending too much on the furlough scheme, not being quick or supportive enough with its support schemes? Yes, being the story and at the centre of a scandal will amount mass pressure and calls for him to resign. But the difficulty in combating the perception of the government is a graver threat. As I said in reference to Campbell, there are some events that no amount of spin or perception management can change, and perhaps the government's handling of COVID is one of them. If Cummings can't do his day job of working out what message he should deliver to non-typical Tory voters, his dream of changing Westminster forever will remain just a dream.
Okay, people, wake up and smell the cock.